Becky and I had no dinner and no tea. Does that happen often? Said Nancy unhappily. You never told me. Are you? Are you hungry now? Sarah looked at her. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I am. I would like to eat that table. I would like to eat you. Nancy jumped up. Sarah, she cried, that a box of things from home today. There's a big cake in it. I'm going to get it now. You and Becky can eat it all. Soon Nancy was back. The three girls sat on Sarah's bed, and there were some happy smiles when Nancy opened her box and took out the cake. Oh, miss, look at that, said Becky. You are kind, Nancy, said Sarah. She laughed. It is magic. You know, when things are very bad, something nice always happens. Here we are, having a party. Nancy gave Sarah and Becky some cake, and they began to eat. Suddenly, they stopped. There was a noise of feet on the stairs. They listened. Oh, no, whispered Becky. It is Miss Minchin. Yes, said Sarah. Her face was white again. Then the door opened, and Miss Minchin came in. So Lavinia was right, she said angrily. Tea with the Princess Sarah. Becky, get back to your attic at once. Oh, please, Miss Minchin, cried Nancy. It was my cake from home. We are only having a party. Go back to your room, Nancy, Miss Minchin said coldly, and take these things with you. And tomorrow, she looked at Sarah, there is no breakfast, no dinner, and no tea for you. Remember that. Soon the attics were quiet again. Tired and hungry, the two servant girls went to sleep. But after an hour or two, Sarah opened her eyes. What, it a noise from the window perhaps? Something is different, Sarah whispered. What is it? She sat up in bed and looked round the room. She looked again and again, and her eyes were very big. The room was different, very different. There was a wonderful hot fire. There were new warm blankets on her bed, and beautiful pictures on the walls. Sarah slowly got out of bed. Is this a dream? She said. Where did all these things come from? She put out her hand to the fire. No, it's not a dream. The fire is hot. I can feel it. And oh, look at the table. There was a red cloth on the table, and cups and plates. There was hot tea and wonderful things to eat. Hot meat pies and sandwiches and cake, oranges and apples. Sarah ran to Becky's room. Becky, she whispered, come quickly, the magic is here again. Come and look. When Becky saw the room, she could not speak at first. Then she said, Oh, miss, what is it? How did all these things get here? I don't know, said Sarah. It is magic. At first I thought it was a dream, but it isn't. Look, these pies are hot. Let's eat them. Hot meat pies aren't a dream? They sat down by the fire and ate and drank. Oh, those pies were good, Miss Becky said. And the tea and the cake, I don't understand magic, but I like it. Sarah looked round the room. Oh, Becky, look. There are some books too. I didn't see them before. She ran to look at them and opened the top book. There's some writing here, listen. It says, to the little girl in the attic, from a friend. Oh, Becky, Sarah closed the book and looked up. I have a friend, Becky, she said slowly. Someone is my friend. The next morning, Becky met Sarah in the kitchen. Oh, miss, she whispered, was the magic there this morning? Or did it go away in the night? No, it's still there, Sarah whispered back. I ate some cold meat pie for breakfast, and the fire was still warm. Becky laughed happily. Oh my, Oh my, she said. Miss Minchin could not understand it. When Sarah came into the schoolroom, she looked happy and well. Miss Minchin wanted to see a white and happy face and eyes red from crying. How can that child smile? She thought angrily, but of course she did not know about the magic, and the magic did not go away. Every evening when Sarah went up to bed, she found new things in the attic. There were more warm blankets for her and for Becky. There were pictures on the walls. There were books, new shoes, and a winter coat. And best of all, there was always a fire and a wonderful hot dinner on the table. But where does it all come from? Becky said. One night when they sat by the fire. Who does it, miss? A friend does it, Sarah said. A kind, wonderful friend. But he doesn't want us to know his name. They began to look at one of the new books, and then Becky looked up. Oh, miss, she whispered, there's something at the window. What is it? Sarah got up to look. It's the monkey, she said. The monkey from next door. She opened the window, and the monkey jumped down into her arms. Oh, you poor little thing, said Sarah. You're so cold. Becky was very interested. I never saw a monkey before, she said. He is not very beautiful, miss. What are you going to do with him? It's very late now, said Sarah. He can stay in my room tonight, and I can take him home in the morning. The next morning, the first visitor to the house next door was Mr. Carmichael, back from Russia. But when he came into the house, his face was sad. Mr. James knew the answer at once. You didn't find her, he said. I found her, Mr. Carmichael said. But it was the wrong girl. Her name is Emily Carew, and she's much younger from Ralph Carew's daughter. I'm very sorry. We must begin again, said Mr. James unhappily. But where? It's 2 years now. 2 years. Well, she isn't at a school in Paris. We know that, Mr. Carmichael said. Let's look at schools in England now. Yes, said Mr. James. Yes, we can begin in London. There is a school next door, Carmichael. Perhaps it was the magic again. But at that moment, Ramdas came quietly into the room. The little servant girl from the attic is here, he said to Mr. James with the monkey. He ran away again last night to her room. Would you like to see her? Yes, said Mr. James. Yes, I would bring her in. And so Sarah came into the room and stood in front of the Indian gentleman. She smiled at him. Your monkey came to my room last night, she said, and I took him in because it was so cold. Mr. James watched her face with interest. That was kind of you, he said. Sarah looked at Ramdas by the door. Shall I give him to the Lascar? She asked. How do you know he is a Lascar? Said Mr. James. Oh, I know Lascar, said Sarah. I was born in India. Mr. James sat up suddenly. In India? He said. But you're a servant at the school next door. Yes, I am now, said Sarah. But I wasn't at first. The Indian gentleman looked at Mr. Carmichael, and then Mr. Carmichael looked at Sarah. What do you mean by at first, child? He asked. When father first took me to the school. Where is your father? Said Mr. Carmichael. He died, said Sarah, very quietly. His friend ran away with all his money, and there was no money for me. There was nobody to take care of me. So Miss Minchin put me in the attic and said I must work for my bread. The Indian gentleman moved in his chair. What was your father's name? He said. Tell me. Sarah looked at him sadly. Ralph Carew, she said. He died in India from a fever 2 years ago. Mr. James' face went very white. Carmichael, he whispered. It is the child! The child! That was an exciting day for many people. At first, poor Sarah did not understand, but Mr. Carmichael talked to her quietly and told her everything, the true story about her father's friend and the diamond mines, and the 2 years of looking for Ralph Crew's daughter, and all the time, she said later to Mr. James when they sat by his fire, I was in the house next door. Tom James took her hand. Yes, he said, and you're never going back there. Your home is with me now. I'm going to take care of Ralph's little missus. Sarah laughed happily. And you were the friend too. All those beautiful things in my attic came from you? You and Ramdas, Becky, and I thought it was magic. The Indian gentleman smiled at her. We were sorry for you, he said. Ramdas can move very quietly, and he carried the things across the roof when you were out. I couldn't find Ralph's daughter, but I wanted to help somebody. And then Ramdas told me about the sad, lonely little servant girl in the attic next door. And so the story ended happily for everybody, but not for Miss Minchin. Sarah was very rich now, and Miss Minchin wanted her to come back to the school. She came to see Mr. James, but he said some very angry things to her, and she went away with a red face. Becky came to live in Mr. James' house, too. She was Sarah's servant, and she was very happy. She had a warm room, nice dresses, and good things to eat every day, and she loved Sarah very much. Nancy often came to visit Sarah, and Sarah helped her with her school lessons again. Nancy was not clever, but she was a true friend. On that first day in the Indian gentleman's house, Sarah wrote a letter to her, and Nancy carried the letter into the schoolroom. There were diamond mines, she told Lavinia and the other girls. There were millions and millions of diamonds in the mines, and half of them are Sarah's, and they were her diamonds all the time when she was cold and hungry in the attic. And she was a princess then, and she is a princess now.